Welcome to Greenable Woodbridge. I am your host, Carolyn Ehrlich. And today, in the background, you can see that we're at the marina because we're going to be talking about what's going to be going on here today. And in the next year or two, actually. We're going to be adding more slips, we're going to be dredging, we're going to be doing some environmental cleanup, we're going to have a tiki bar, we're going to have food trucks come, and one of them we have a permanent ice cream food truck, which I'm excited about. We are going to be improving the dog park, we're going to be improving our walkways, we're going to have better parking and better lighting, and we will be having from the end of the marina a bridge that will connect us to the park. All beautiful. But in my mind, because I've become a bit of an environmental junkie because I've been hanging out with my guests a bit too much, the most exciting thing that's going to be happening here is we are going to be having a living shoreline. So with me today to explain what a living shoreline is Tom Flynn, who's the town's environmental specialist and our in-house environmental genius. And with us is Chris Abrupta from Rutgers, and he's probably one of a few geniuses on the environment in Rutgers, but he does the water with us, the biology, and some of you who watch the show may remember Tom and Chris from our talks about rain gardens. But today we're talking about the living shoreline. What is a living shoreline? Go for it,
I guess I'll start. So we're talking about a protected and stabilized shoreline that's made of natural materials such as rock, plants, and sand. It's considered a green infrastructure technique. It can be just plants alone, or it can have a sill and some hard structure associated with it, but for the most part, it's using vegetation to stabilize. It's a very good alternative to having bulkheads and riprap along the shoreline.
And why is it better? What is the benefit of doing this?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle, and thank you for the kind words too. So, one of the neat things about these projects is their ability to bounce back, right? So after these significant storm events that we've been getting so much more frequently, they could come back and be better able to adapt over time, and that's what kind of coined them as these resiliency type projects, right? So they're not going to stop a Sandy, they're not going to stop an Ida, but they're another tool in the toolbox. There are ways that we can continue to enhance our habitat, make wise decisions where the land and the water meets on these sensitive areas, connect people to the coastline, and just do something positive for the area.
So, Tom talked about resilience. It's interesting. He did some research on this, and actually a living shoreline is proven to be more resilient than a bulkhead to hurricanes because of just that fact that it can bounce back much quickly. When a bulkhead gets destroyed, you have to rebuild it. When a living shoreline gets hit with a hurricane, it just comes back right afterwards. So it's an interesting system. Actually, the tidal grasses that we have in it, it can absorb some of the sediment and filter out that sediment and kind of hold it in the shoreline, actually build up the shoreline as sea level rises too. So that makes it more resilient. The other thing that we've noticed is that these shorelines, because they're buffering the energy, the wave energy, it really only takes about 15 feet of marshland to reduce about 50% of that wave energy. So it doesn't take a lot to really make a big difference. And that stops that erosion that occurs, and you've seen a lot of it over the Jersey Shore over the last few weeks, that all the eroding shorelines, you don't see that with the living shoreline because it helps protect against that. So
that's very interesting. And now I read that there are several types of living shorelines. What are they, and what are we planning to put into our living shoreline?
So one type is just vegetation alone. Then there's something what's called an edging, where you do have kind of a bit of a hard edge on it with vegetation behind it. And then you have what's kind of called this sill, where you're building out and you're putting stuff out and you're building up behind it. And that's kind of what we're doing here. And that works out very nicely because we'll have a stone structure, off the shoreline, and then grasses behind it, and then as the tide comes in, sediment will settle out and those grasses will raise and actually build up the shoreline, and it provides great habitat in that area. The last kind of living shoreline is often called a breakwater. So it's the same kind of thing where you have the vegetation on the shoreline, but now you go out, 50 or 60 feet, and you have stone out there to break down the energy, and that's very good for high wave action. And you don't have that here on this river, but in some places you really need that. Where you have like a big wide bay, you might have wave action that you need to break up, and that stone breakwater does a great job of that, but coupled together, it creates this kind of living shoreline. And like I said, we're going to use this sill model here, and we're really excited about it. Hopefully, a lot of it we could build ourselves, and
that's what we're hoping, and get some volunteers and have the community actually involved with building this. And one of the interesting ways for the community to be involved. Tom and I have been doing, and our committees have been doing a whole lot of work on food and the food cycle and what happens to the food waste. And we don't want it going to a landfill. And our restaurants can provide us with the very things that we need for our living shoreline. So let's explain how that works.
Yeah, and it just to your point too, Chris. So what we're trying to do is allow for the shoreline edge to keep up with sea level rise, right? So by doing that, there's so many animals call the shoreline home. And a lot of them like shell, a lot of them like these near shore structures, like so for baby fish, that's where they get their start. That's where crabs get their food sources. So these are such dynamic areas. So by adding things like shell from clams and oysters, we kind of give those species a little bit of a jump start,
right?
While also adding to the project design. So, some really cool projects have been started like that, where restaurants do a lot of shell recycling. So we hope to get on board.
And there's a town down the shore, somewhere in the shore, maybe it's Ocean County. I think you were familiar with it, where it was a veterans project. Can you tell us about that?
Captain Al at the American Littoral Society, I can't say enough great things about him and the work that he does, and he's integral at this, and we hope to partner with him as we get further down with construction. But he works closely with veterans and volunteer groups, and starting these basically benthic communities to get moving in relation to these kinds of resiliency projects.
Okay, so is it time to start collecting all those shells yet? Or
I think we're getting close.
Well, the shells are it's a great basis for having the oyster larvae come and they sit on the shells and they start creating these oyster reefs. So it's kind of a natural occurring thing. And that's a lot of what protected our shorelines in the past, were these oyster reefs, and we've lost a lot of them because of pollution.
Right.
So we're seeing a lot of people trying to create these along in the Raritan Bay, down in the Barnegat Bay, and trying to do the same thing, where they're putting out the shells, the oyster larvae attached to the shells, and you start getting these oyster reefs developing.
Cool.
And that's what the American Littoral Society has really been big into, trying to get people to encourage that to happen. It's a great organization, great opportunity.
Aren't there lots of benefits to having oysters on our shoreline?
Well, it does provide food for the fish and habitat. It also, the oysters themselves will help reduce that wave energy that's coming in and stop some of that erosion. The concern always with oysters, though, is that we're worried about people coming and harvesting them, because sometimes it's not the best waters to be harvesting from. So we have to be careful about that sometimes, but for the most part, the oysters themselves will pull pollution out of the water and clean the water. So they act as like a filtering system. So it's like the coastal water's own Brita filter. It's kind of it's really pretty cool. So yeah.
That is really cool. Now, this stops the erosion, slows it down.
Yeah. So the erosion occurs because you have wave energy, right? So you have the wave energy coming in, lots of energy, kicks up the sand and pulls it out, and that's where a lot of it occurs. And you see a lot of that, when you have bulkheads, you see it in front of the bulkheads, and it starts eroding to the shoreline. But when you have these natural systems, when a wave comes in, it's getting slowed down by these systems, right? So the energy gets dissipated, and then once that energy decreases, a lot of the sediment settles out that's in the wave. So now you start building up these systems. Like Tom said, we start building up the shoreline, and it starts keeping up with sea level rise. So hopefully, unless we get out of control and sea level rise gets out of control, but we think we can keep up with it.
Keep up with it. That would be great.
Yeah.
Great. The people who live here will love that.
Yeah, I think so too.
So back in the 1900s, we had the beach It was where all the rich people from the city would come. It was Boynton Beach, and it was quite a place. And some of these homes that are behind us are from that era. And I'm just wondering, if they had put in a living shoreline in 1900, would we still have Boynton Beach here?
You know, that's such a great question, Carol. And questions like that is, you know, kind of what got me into coastal resilience and these projects, like connecting people and nature and these special places. And I think so. I think we would have more of a remnants, you know, certainly. You know, one of the things that Chris mentioned when it comes to that wave energy, right? So the bulkheading that's there now, that wave energy gets reflected off of bulkheads. It doesn't get absorbed. So, you know, a lot of the projects that we're talking about, you know, like we've kind of alluded to, it provides the ability for nature to work within its own systems. Mm-hmm. So that's certainly the hope, is that anything we build is going to be here 100 years from now.
And the living shoreline gets better with time?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of a regenerative practice, actually. So it kind of regenerates itself as it goes along, making itself better and bigger. And as long as you take care of it, I mean, you have to get out there and pull the trash out, you know, and every once in a while, after this big storm event, you have to check it out and make sure there's no breaches in it, and you might have to do some minor repairs. But for the most part, it really does a great job of kind of being that long-term resilience and kind of regenerative in its nature. So it's one of the processes that we'd love to see in other places in the environment. How do we help the environment get started and let it regenerate itself? We don't see that too often in our society. The other thing we have to be concerned about too is when we build these living shorelines, you know, they're meant for a certain reason, to reduce wave energy, to protect the environment, provide habitat, and there's certain times we want to get people to the shore, because we love people at the shore, because they come to the river, they love the river, and then they work hard to advocate for its protection. So when we have a living shoreline, we can have people around those things, but often we want to keep people away from them so they can work really nicely on their own, and they could maybe have some passive recreation on them, but we don't want people trampling through them, you know, because that's going to take away from it. So we've got to be very careful to provide people have access to see what they want to see, but also kind of keep people a little bit away from it so it'll protect its system. So we're working on that as part of the design.
It's going to also be a living museum. You can see but don't touch.
Yeah, that's true.
So it kind of maintains itself. We just have to keep it clean, keep the garbage out.
For the most part, I mean, you may have to go in and check the vegetation, and during a big storm, some vegetation may get washed out. You may have to go back replant it, you know. But for the most part, there's not a lot of extra work you have to do to it. A lot of it's monitoring, and you get a lot of scientific monitoring as people come out and look at, you know, what habitat's being created, what species are in there, you know.
Oh, I bet you're going to be here all the time.
Yeah, so there's a lot of the biologists and ecologists will be here looking at it, and hopefully not trampling through it. Can't have that. You know, so being careful and studying it and trying to understand how it's working. You know, there's not a lot of living shorelines, you know, on this waterway. So this is a great opportunity to explore this and get more people to see it.
And the Department of Environmental Protection is thrilled that we're doing this.
Yeah,
we've been applying for some grants. Hopefully, we've gotten one already, didn't we? We got a planning grant?
Yep.
So this is all good. So during a storm, I imagine it won't stop it, but what impact will it have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it might depend a little bit on the age of the project itself, right? So a younger project that might just be constructed if it got hit by a significant storm event, like Chris had said, you want to go out there and make sure if you use core fiber logs that, you know, they're still tied down, shell is in the right spots, you know, any plant material that might have got ripped out by wind. But really, the goal is by year 5 or 6. You should kind of be able to do a site assessment from the land here and say, okay, you know, the project looks pretty good. You know, we'll dive in and make sure, you know.
You don't really want to dive in.
But really, I think a lot of the monitoring is going to come from our fishermen and folks that use the waterway, because by year 5 or 6, they should start seeing more nursery habitat, bigger fish coming by. You know, that's the kind of monitoring that we're hoping for.
You'll see the fishermen migrating down the beach, fishing around is what you're going to see. You know, that's going to be a big piece of it too. The only big thing about it is the marine debris. I mean, we do have a lot of marine debris that comes up and down the river that flushes through. and then during high tides it settles out in different places. So that's one thing we'd have to be careful about and make sure that that's not taking away from this feature. But other than that, I don't really see too many problems. I think it will do a great job of protecting the roadway, which is right next to it. So now you're reducing energy, right? So it's not going to be undermining the road back here. So I think that's a big piece of it too that we worry about, is how can we use these things not just to protect people's homes, but also protect other infrastructure and like roadways, and also restore the environment so we have some habitat. And they say by the year 2100, about 33% of all shoreline will be hardened shoreline. So you lose a lot of the fisheries, a lot of the biodiversity. So we really, by doing these projects, we can actually really do a better job of that. So
I think we should take a walk over to show where this is going to be. And I just want to do a little plug. So if anybody's listening to this who wants to be a volunteer and be a part of it, you can call Tom at Town Hall, and he'll put your name on the list, and we will have a good time putting this all together. So thank you, gentlemen.
Well, thank
and
you.
Let's take a little walk over here with the camera, and you can explain what's going to happen. So here we are on the beach, and the living shoreline is going to go here, slightly behind us. Yep.
Absolutely,
Right
Kyle.
here.
Yeah. So this is our project site. Behind us, you can see there's some existing native plants, some Spartina alterniflora, smooth cordgrass is a common name, and the idea is really to bring that further this way. And like Chris had mentioned, before, things like jetties and groins, they don't add any type of material to the system overall. But what we're hoping for is that this beach essentially accretes on itself and becomes a little bit wider, a little bit more resilient over time.
That would be terrific. And the first step, I think you said, was bringing in some rocks,
yeah,
right?
so we'll have stone out here a little bit, and then behind the stone we'll be putting plants. And what'll happen is those plants will kind of mix in with the plants already down there. This will be a whole beautiful vegetated system. And they're trying to put a little pathway along the back here so you can still walk along it. We're at low tide right now, we can see, but water comes up pretty far during high tide. So this system will be really great for collecting sediment, making this beach bigger. It'll be really, really nice.
That'll be great. So when you talk about wave energy, what you're seeing right now is low wave energy, right?
And this is just from boats going by. I mean, when the wind picks up, it kicks those waves up pretty high, 2 or 3 feet high, and coming in here. So eventually that starts to undermine this wall here, when the waves get really big. So by having this out there will help prevent some of that from happening. Once this wall gets undermined here, then the road is in danger of collapsing. Right. So by building out the beach, we can prevent all that from happening and create a beautiful habitat for fish and other wildlife.
That is terrific. Yeah. And so we are trying to start this project in the spring. So when I said before about anybody wanting to volunteer, this is just a great project that the whole community can be involved in. And
we'll need a lot of people to put plants in the ground, so it'll be great to have people out here helping us do that. Great.
In my time here at the township, I've done a few community projects. I did the community playground in Merrill Park, the community art wall as you walk into the community center. So with you gentlemen, we are going to have a community living shoreline.
Excellent.
So
great.
Everybody should be involved. It'll be great.
Beautiful.
So thank you again. This is just very, very exciting. Thank you, Tom and Chris. This was a great show, very, very informative, and it's something that we're all learning a lot about. It's very new, so thank you for bringing it to us. And thank you, everybody, for watching Greenable Woodbridge, being part of the change and part of the excitement.